Hi, welcome to the channel. So today I wanted to share with you how Jesus Christ supernaturally saved me out of a non-Christian background. I'd never been to church in my life. I didn't know any Christians, and I don't think I'd ever read a Bible. So there are four major events that happened in my life that led up to me becoming a Christian, and I want to share them with you today. So the first event was me leaving home at 18. I had an unhappy childhood. There was some physical and emotional abuse and neglect in my childhood. So I left home at 18. I just couldn't wait to get away. I moved to the city on my own. I was very naive. I didn't smoke or drink or use drugs. I had never had a boyfriend. I was really naive, and I moved to the city, got myself a menial job, and immediately within like a week, the people that I worked with had introduced me to drugs. So they all used to smoke cannabis. Like, we worked night shifts, so they'd smoke cannabis in their breaks, and they introduced me to this. I'd never even had a cigarette, but I didn't want to say that I had never had a cigarette because I felt embarrassed, I guess. So I started to, sorry, I have a cough and a cold, but I really wanted to record this video today. So yeah, the first time I smoked cannabis, I got completely out of my head. Obviously I was no tolerance level for it at all. And I was working a night shift, and I basically went in the restroom and lied down. So people came to find me, and there I was, like, I was only like 18. I was lying there in the restroom, like on a chair. They just left me there, and eventually I came round. They were all fine with me being like that because they'd given me the cannabis. I don't think they knew I'd never smoked it. But anyway, it just went on from there, and then I'd meet socially with these people after work, and we'd use cannabis and other drugs. It was mainly speed and LSD, sometimes cocaine if we went to parties. So I was just doing all this. I never really thought about it. I never really thought it was something I should or shouldn't do. You know, everyone was doing it, so I was just joining in, basically. So around this time, I met my covenant husband. So this was actually, it was sort of a major event in some ways. My first husband, that is. In other ways, it wasn't. He just sort of like slotted into my lifestyle. He also would smoke cannabis. So, but once we met each other, I didn't tend to do any drugs with him, really. Very occasionally if there were people around, but not on our own. We never did that. My first boyfriend, I wasn't his first girlfriend. I sort of fell in love with him. I'd come from like a reasonably abusive background. I had low self-esteem, low self-worth. He was my first boyfriend, and that was it for me. I just fell for him, and I'm not sure whether still to this day whether he felt the same about me. I think he perhaps did for a while. So yeah, we were together. We were still hanging out with a lot of people who use drugs and that sort of lifestyle. So this isn't a major event, but it is something that happened during this time. Where I was living, the landlady's friend was a Christian. It was the first Christian I'd ever met. Her name was Sue. I remember that much. And she used to invite me round her house, and I used to go round her house. She'd been saved she was a victim of domestic violence, and she'd been saved, and she went to church. And I remember being at her house, and her ex-partner or husband, whoever it was, used to come round, bang on the door and scream and shout, and she'd be scared, and I'd be in the living room with her. I mean, all that was like normal to me. You know, there was just chaos everywhere. All the people I knew were living in chaos and broken relationships and drugs and alcohol and abuse, and you know, that was just my normal everyday life at that age. So myself and Paul, his name is, my first husband, I think we got engaged a couple of years later. A year after that, I fell pregnant, and we had our child. We had a little girl. I'm not quite sure where we got married, because neither of us were Christians, and didn't seem to be that big a deal. But we did get married, and we got married. My relationship with Paul was really, really good in some ways, and really, really bad in other ways. We both came from abusive backgrounds. His background far, far, far more abusive than mine. Obviously, with hindsight, we were both really messed up young people. I had no idea how to conduct myself in a relationship. I didn't know, when you're young and you don't know. I mean, I didn't know, the Bible. I didn't know how God had created marriage to be. I just instinctively thought that marriage was about getting my needs fulfilled, or at least not being neglected on any level. And I guess he felt the same. And we would just argue and fight, intensely. But we were just always falling out and arguing. And he left a few times and came back. Maybe I think I might have left him and came back. Anyway, one day he did leave. We had a massive row. He did leave. I just thought he'd come back, but he didn't. So after Paul had left, I called him. I don't know how long it was after he left. It wasn't long. And I called him. He'd moved in with his brother, so I had the phone number. There were no mobiles then. We're talking like, I don't know when, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I called him and he basically said he wasn't going to come back and he didn't want to be with me anymore. And it was over. And that was a turning point for me. A massive turning point. I couldn't cope with it. I loved him. I didn't want to have a broken family. I'd grown up. My parents were still together. I had no experience. I didn't know in my immediate family, or I didn't know anybody who was like divorced or on their own raising a child. I loved him. I remember falling down onto the floor. I remember holding the phone. I remember the green phone, those old-fashioned British Telecom phones. I was holding it to my ear, and when he went, I just remember falling onto the floor, hysterical. I don't remember our child being in the room when this happened. I think she was asleep. But I was completely beside myself. Anyone who's had a broken relationship, heartbreak, knows that initial feeling when you realise it's over. I realised it was over in a way because he was different. We'd always come back together, even every time we'd broken up, and I guess I assumed that was going to be the same. But he was adamant he wasn't going to come home. And it wasn't long after that he went no contact with me. So in those days, there was no social media. I think he moved out of his brother's house. I couldn't contact him. He knew my mother's address, and he would send presents to our daughter on birthday and Christmas to my mother's address. So I knew a different group of people now because we'd moved. So I knew a different group of people, but a similar lifestyle, drugs, alcohol, partying, that sort of thing. So I hadn't really been doing that when we were married, but when he'd gone, I fell back into that lifestyle because there was nothing else. I was suicidal, I was depressed, I was heartbroken, and these people were there and they were nice to me, and they're nice people, and they befriended me, and I got on with them. So we just every night they'd come to my house because we were quite young, and most of these people were like 18, 19, 20, 21. So they didn't have anywhere to hang out, so they would come to my house and we'd all use drugs. They'd always bring drugs around. I never bought drugs in my life. I never needed to. So we'd always use drugs. It was the same things, cannabis every night, some alcohol, but not much. LSD, we did a lot of LSD, we did a lot of speed, we occasionally cocaine, partying, that sort of thing. Crazy, crazy, crazy times. I wouldn't have them around my house until my daughter was asleep, and they'd obviously go sort of late in the evening. They'd go. I'd get up and take her to nursery. Sometimes she'd stay with my mum at the weekends, so then I'd have more of a free house and more stuff going on. I just need to get some water. Yeah, so this went on for a while, but I was heartbroken. I was suicidal. The only thing that stopped me doing something stupid was, I guess, these friends. They were really good friends to me, the people that I was like using drugs with. They were really, really nice people, really good friends. And also, obviously, my daughter. I didn't want to leave her on her own. She'd already lost her dad, which was just heartbreaking for me that she'd lost her dad. I just couldn't believe it. I never thought it would happen. I never thought that we'd ever split up. I really didn't. So I was always carrying these feelings of suicide in the back of my mind. I remember thinking often about what I would do or how I would do it. And some of the times that we were using drugs, they were really, really good, and some of them were really, really bad. And like the come downs were really, really bad for me, because in the come down I wasn't high, and so all the feelings came back of like the rejection and losing my husband and being a single parent and not having any money, and my daughter not having her dad, and everything was just black. And I remember those come downs as a big black space in my head that I just did not want to be in, but there was no escaping it, none at all. It was horrifying. It was really frightening, and there was no way I could escape it. I remember them. So during this time, you know, some people, you know, when they break up, they pull themselves together, don't they? And they come out of it and they decide to like make a life for themselves or get a career, or they're interested. I wasn't interested in careers or status or power or money or anything. If I had been, it might have been easier. I might have come out of it easier. But I knew, even though I wasn't a Christian, I knew those things were pointless, because you couldn't take them with you when you died. I wasn't a believer at all. I didn't have any belief in God, but I just knew that it was pointless. So none of those things were inspiring to me. So there was nothing really that could pick me up and get me out of the hole that I was in, the pit that I was in. So my husband had gone no contact with me, and I hadn't seen him at this time. I hadn't seen him for maybe 3 years or so. He was sending presents to my mum's address. So one day I saw the postcode and it was an area of London. So I went to the local library. We didn't have internet in those days. Went to the library and got the phone book for London, for the area. And his name was there and his address, like in the phone book. So I asked my brother if he'd drive me to London. And I decided I was going to go and see him. And I was completely heartbroken and in a terrible, terrible state. I went to see him hoping that as soon as he saw me, you know, it would be there, you know, that connection with us that we'd had and that had kept us together all those years, because I loved him and I wanted him back. So I knocked on it. I went to London and found his address and knocked on his door. I never stopped to think that he might be in a shared house and he might not be there, or other people might answer the door, or he might have a girlfriend living there. I never stopped to think of any of that. So I knocked on the door. God must have been with me, because he opened the door and he was in the house on his own, and he invited me in, and I was really shook up inside, but I tried to maintain some calm. And I sat down in the front room in his house on a beanbag, and he sat on a chair above me to the left of me, and I sat there, and he's like, you know, so what are you doing here? Why you come here? What? And I'm like, I love you, and I want us to save our marriage. I believe we can save it. And he's like, no, I don't want that. I don't love you anymore, he said to me. And he said, I'm mixing in different circles now, indicating that he knew people like in the royal family, or people who had like positions of power or status or something in London. Also indicating that I was a single parent living in the poor area of town on benefit and not working. I think he's indicating that, which I was, because he had left me. And he made it clear. He was really hard. Like, I thought I would be able to break through, I guess, and we'd be able to get back what we always had. But he was really, really stony-faced and hard. And I obviously was completely beside myself. So I wanted to try and persuade him to come back. But this is like the first time I had an experience of God in this moment. So I was sat on this beanbag and I was going to say to him, but I love you and I need you and I want you and I can't live without you and all that sort of stuff. And as I went to sort of speak, I felt a hand like this on my head, and it pushed, just like I can feel my hand now. It was pushing my head. Like I could feel myself having to push forward against it, and I could feel the warmth and the fingers and my hair go down. You know, when someone puts a hand on the head, you feel your hair go down like that. It was exactly like that feeling. And so And then suddenly out of my mouth, I heard myself say, okay, please, can you take me to the coach station? And I'm like, where did that come from? You know, I hadn't planned to say that, but these words came out of my mouth, and I did think it was odd. I didn't know what that was all about. So anyway, he took me to the coach station. I was crying in the car, and while we were driving along, he said to me, you have to accept that our daughter, he said her name, doesn't have a father anymore. And that was it. That was the final straw. I completely broke down. I was hysterical because I really wanted her. It still gets me upset. You know, more than anything, I wanted my daughter to have a father and not grow up without a dad. I just couldn't believe how callous he could be to say that to me at that moment. But he did say that to me. So he dropped me at the station, and obviously I was crying, and I got on the bus back to my hometown, where he'd lived until he left. And I'm on the coach, and I sat 2 seats. I sat on my own. It was quite empty. It was nighttime, evening, I think, by then. And we got back to my hometown. So as we were driving like towards my hometown, maybe 10 minutes away, I suddenly decided I was just going to step in front of the bus. I had no reason to live anymore, or so I believed. So what I decided to do was get off the bus. The bus stopped on a hill, so it stopped on the hill. I decided I'd get off the bus and walk down the hill so it had built up speed. So I got off the bus and I walked down the road far enough to know that it would have built up speed by then. And I heard the bus engine sort of rev as it starts to pull away. So it started to pull away, picked up speed and came towards me. And I stepped out in front of the bus. And as I stepped out in front of the bus, something hit me here and pushed me back like that onto the pavement, and the bus went by. And I'm like, whoa, what was that? That was so powerful to push me back. I was like, I remembered the hand on my head and then that feeling of being pushed back. And I just went home. My daughter was with my mum that night. So I just went home, went to bed, sort of was on my own that night. I woke up the next day and just decided to get out of it, get as out of it as I could possibly get. So everybody came round, all my friends came round, and we were just really taking drugs and just getting completely out of it. And then I don't think it was that night, but I think it was probably the next night when everyone was around. I was another green beanbag. They must have been in fashion those days. So I was sat on a green beanbag in my own house, and I don't think I'd been using any drugs because I remember not being out of my head. I was just sat on this green beanbag and everyone around me was like, you know, it was just a bit of a crazy night, chatting and noisy and the usual hubbub that would go on. I was just sat there quietly on the beanbag. It's just like a couple of nights after I'd seen Paul. And I just heard a voice and it spoke really, really clear to me. You asked me if it was audible, if it was in my head, and I can't remember. Even at the time, I remember thinking, did I hear that audibly or was it in my head? Because it was so loud and it said, go to church. And I'm sat there on this beanbag at 2 o'clock in the morning, surrounded by all these people using drugs. And I looked out the window because I don't know why, I just felt I needed to look out the window and not at what's going on around me. And there were trees outside, and the trees, everything just seemed to freeze. And I just heard this, I'd already heard the words, but they were going over and over in my head. Go to church, go to church, go to church, go to church. I'm looking out the window thinking, why would I want to do that? I'd never been to church, never read a Bible, didn't know any Christians. I knew what church people were like, you know. They weren't like me, you know. Church people were like as far away from me as I could possibly imagine. Why would I want to be there? They were I felt like church people were quite scary, you know. I don't know. But anyway, I thought about this all night, and then the next morning I phoned a friend and said, do you want to come to church with me on Sunday? And she's like, okay. So we walked down. It was a local Church of England church on the estate where I lived. So we walked down there together. I'll just put a picture up now if I can, so you can see the little church that I went to. So we walked into the church and went and sat 3 rows back from the front. Which 20 minutes later I realised was probably the worst place we could have sat. Sat 3 rows back from the front. Church service started. We had no idea what was going on. So we were just taking our cue from everyone around us, like standing up, sitting down, singing a song, listening to someone speak, then someone would pray, and everything that was going on. We were just trying to follow what was going on. You know, we probably looked a bit of a mess compared to everyone else in the church. And then they sang this song, and they started off with, Father God, I wonder how I managed to exist without the knowledge of your parenthood and your loving care. And now I am your son, I am adopted in your family, and I can never be alone because, Father God, you're there beside me. Cue me falling basically onto the chair, hysterically sobbing. The church was quite, people were not too demonstrative in that church at that time. And it was pretty obvious that something had happened to me, and I just could not stop sobbing. And I was sobbing and crying and shaking, and I think my friend was like putting her hand on my shoulder, and she had no idea what was going on. And what was happening was God was speaking to me, and he's saying, Julie, I'm real, I exist. I'm God. I am real. I am the God of the Bible, and the Bible is true. All of it is my word to my people. The Bible is true, and Jesus died for you to save you from your sins, and I love you. And as he said, I love you, I felt my whole body fill with this huge sense. It was like liquid, pure honey being sort of poured into me, and it was just full of love. My whole body was just filled with this sense of wonderful, beautiful, warm, caring love, and I knew how much God loved me. And a lot of stuff, the main reason I was sobbing was because I was so relieved. I was so, thank God all this is over. I was thinking, I just knew, that something amazing had happened to me, and I knew the one thing I was sure about was that God was real and the Bible was true. And I knew, I guess, it was going to change my life, and I just couldn't go on the way I'd been going, because I probably would have made another suicide attempt. So that's how I became a Christian. That's how I found God, or he found me. So I went home. Everyone came around that night as usual, and I'm just like, hey, I've become a Christian, so no, I'm not smoking and doing drugs or getting drunk, or I'm not going to be in relationships, because I've been in a few relationships after my husband had left. That's it. I'm a born again Christian now. Some of them came in and some of them didn't even come in. But the ones that came in and the ones that I talked to about it, I took them all to church in the end. So some of them actually did find God. Some of them weren't interested. But from that moment, my life changed. I said to my daughters, so I would go to church, that church. I was Church England Church. I went there like every Sunday for like a couple of years. My daughter would go there as well. She was about 6, I guess, by then. She would go there as well, and every Sunday she'd go to the kids groups. And eventually, I think after a couple of years, I went to I studied a degree. Moved to London to do a degree in theology, and God had saved me. He'd saved me from my own hell, basically. And I think he knew that for me there was no other way out, because the general everyday trappings of the world had never appealed to me anyway. So I wasn't going to be able to get out of the pit because I got a good job, or I got lots of money, or I had some newfound status or power within society, or all the normal things that most people aim for, aspire to. I didn't anyway. So I think that God knew there was absolutely no way out for me. He had to reach me, and I didn't know any Christians. So there was no other way. The only way he could reach me was to speak to me that night and tell me to go to church. Oh yeah, and one thing, luckily, although I guess it was God ordained it to be this way, the vicar of the church at that time was very open to people like me from my background, and he let me go in. I'd go in every week. Him and his wife lived in like the manse around the corner from the church. I'd go in every week and talk to him for an hour just about, you know, Paul and my history and what I'd been through as a child. And he did this. He supported me for a couple of years until I went off to theological college. He was top class. He was first class. He couldn't have been more perfect. God had ordained that they put that vicar was there, for me, you know, to be there at that time. When I was still, my friends would come around, and sometimes at 2 a.m, you know, I'd be sharing my faith with them, and they'd say, "Oh, I need to ask your vicar this, your vicar that." And one of them even phoned him up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can't believe it. He had children as well. This man had children. One of them, and you know what? On the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, he was fantastic. He never once complained. And I'd rock up at his house all times of day and night, you know, with people. This person, you know, because I'd meet people if I was out, or I still had quite a big social circle. And I'd always, you know, if someone, their husband had left them, or they were in other problems like maybe drugs or domestic abuse, I'd just rock up at his manse, it was called, with these people in tow, and he'd have me in, and he'd talk to me, and he'd talk to them, and he was so fantastic. You know, he was perfect for that time in my life. I'm forever grateful for him and how he helped me. So yeah, that's my story of becoming a Christian. My husband didn't come back in the end. Lots has happened since then. I mean, if you want to watch my other videos, you'll see other things that have happened, but just trying to focus on that initial time when I became a Christian, how it changed my life. I did go to theological college, got my qualification, and then I started, not long after that, I started working. My calling has always been to the homeless and the poor and the people on the edge of society and drug users, and that's where I've been working. That's where God called me to, and I've been working in that area for like all my Christian life, really. My daughter grew up to be a Christian. She still goes to church every week. I don't go to church much because I had some issues. I've had some issues with church, which you might know from watching my videos, but she goes to church every week. She's married now, and she's got 3 kids, and they're all going to church and Sunday school every week. So yeah, I wanted to try and keep this video to 30 minutes if I could. But like I said earlier, if you have been through any of the similar things I've been through, if you're going through that now, or you want to chat with me, I'm always open for you to contact me. I'll leave my contact details in the description. Please feel free to contact me. I don't know if you want to speak to me on the phone or do a video call or whatever. You know, if you're going through any of the things that I went through, I'm more than happy to talk to you, help you, pray with you. So I think I'll finish there. Yeah, thanks for watching.